The alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base at 4:32 a.m., and Captain Maya Reeves was already awake, staring at the ceiling of her quarters. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them against her chest, feeling her heart hammer beneath her flight suit. Today wasn't supposed to be different from any other training exercise, but the encrypted message she'd received 3 hours earlier had changed everything. Somewhere over the Pacific, a commercial airliner carrying 273 souls had gone dark, and she was being scrambled to intercept an unidentified aircraft that had appeared on radar, flying an aggressive intercept course toward it. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Maya pulled on her boots and grabbed her helmet, her mind racing through every procedure she'd drilled 1,000 times. She'd been flying F-15 Eagles for 6 years, but this was her first real-world emergency scramble. As she sprinted across the tarmac, the cold morning air bit at her face, and she could see her crew chief, Master Sergeant Chen, already waiting by her aircraft. The F-15 stood like a predator in the darkness, its twin engines gleaming under the floodlights. Chen handed her the mission brief without a word, but his eyes told her everything. This was serious. Aircraft is designated Unknown 87, Chen said quickly as Maya climbed the ladder. Flying erratic patterns, no transponder, no radio contact. They want you up there in 6 minutes, Captain. Maya nodded, her throat tight. 6 minutes. That meant maximum performance takeoff, the kind that would pin her to her seat and test every system on the aircraft to its limits. She'd done it in training, but never with lives hanging in the balance. Never knowing that somewhere out there, families were watching flight trackers, praying for a miracle. She settled into the cockpit, her hands moving through the pre-flight checks with practiced precision. Toggle switches clicked, displays flickered to life, and the familiar hum of the aircraft systems wrapped around her like an old friend. "Tower, Viper 2-1, ready for immediate departure," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The response was instant. "Viper 2-1, cleared for takeoff runway 24, climb and maintain flight level 400, contact departure on secured frequency." Maya's fingers tightened on the throttle. This was it. She pushed the throttles forward, and the F-15 began to roll. The runway lights blurred into streams of white as she advanced to military power, then slammed the throttles into full afterburner. The acceleration was savage, a monstrous force that crushed her back into her seat as 29,000 pounds of thrust turned fuel into raw speed. The nose lifted at 150 knots, and suddenly she was climbing nearly vertical, the earth falling away beneath her at an impossible angle. 5,000 feet. 10,000. 20,000. The altimeter spun like a clock gone mad, and Maya's breathing came in controlled bursts through her oxygen mask. "Viper 2-1, contact Eagle Control," the tower called, and Maya switched frequencies, her aircraft still rocketing upward through 35,000 feet. "Eagle Control, Viper 2-1 passing through 35,000 for 40,000, she reported. The voice that came back was tense. "Viper 2-1, your target is at your 12 o'clock, 80 miles, heading 270, speed 450 knots. Commercial traffic is 40 miles beyond, turning to evade. You are weapons hold, I repeat, weapons hold. Your mission is identification and escort only." Maya's stomach knotted. Identification meant getting close, close enough to see into the cockpit, close enough to know if this was a threat or a tragedy in progress. She leveled off at 40,000 feet and pushed her speed to 600 knots, eating up the distance. Her radar showed the unknown aircraft clearly now, a mid-sized jet, but something was wrong with its flight pattern. It was weaving slightly, descending and climbing in shallow waves like a wounded bird. 60 miles. 50 miles. 40 miles. Maya could see the commercial airliner on her radar now, a Boeing 777, turning hard to the north. "Eagle Control, Viper 2-1 has tally on Unknown 87, moving to visual identification." Her hands were steady now, all nervousness burned away by focus. This was what she'd trained for. This was what she was made for. She closed the distance carefully, positioning herself off the unknown aircraft's left wing, matching its speed. What she saw made her blood run cold. The aircraft was a private jet, its windows dark except for the cockpit, where a single figure slumped over the controls. "Eagle Control, Viper 2-1, I have visual on one pilot, appears unconscious, aircraft is in uncontrolled flight." The words felt like stones in her mouth. This wasn't an attack. This was hypoxia, decompression, or medical emergency. Someone up there was dying, and that aircraft was a missile heading toward the commercial flight. Viper 2-1, can you establish wing contact? The question hung in the air. Wing contact meant flying so close that she could rock her wings, flash her lights, try to wake the pilot through sheer proximity. It was dangerous, especially with an aircraft flying unpredictably, but it might be the only chance. Roger, Eagle Control, attempting wing contact. Maya eased her F-15 closer, 20 feet, 15 feet, close enough to see the frost forming on the private jet's windows, close enough to see the pilot's head lolling against the side window. She rocked her wings violently, the F-15's massive control surfaces creating wake turbulence that buffeted the smaller jet. Nothing. She hit her external lights, strobing them in the pre-dawn darkness. Still nothing. The commercial airliner was 30 miles away now, and the private jet's erratic course was taking it directly into the flight path. Maya's mind raced. If the pilot didn't wake up, if someone didn't do something, 273 people were going to die. Eagle Control, pilot is non-responsive, aircraft continuing on intercept course with commercial traffic. Her voice was calm, but her heart was screaming. There had to be another way. Then she saw it, a small detail that changed everything. The private jet's landing gear indicator light was illuminated on the fuselage. The gear was down. That meant the aircraft was experiencing massive drag, burning fuel fast. If she could just buy time, if she could just keep it away from the airliner long enough, it would run out of fuel and the engines would quit, forcing an emergency that might wake the pilot or at least end the threat. Eagle Control, request permission to execute shepherding maneuver, Maya called. There was a pause, a long terrible pause. Viper 2-1, clarify shepherding maneuver. Maya took a deep breath. I'm going to use wake turbulence to push the aircraft off course, keep it away from the commercial traffic until fuel starvation forces a change in situation. Another pause. Viper 2-1, that's extremely dangerous and not in any manual we have. Maya looked at the private jet, at the slumped pilot, at the blinking light on her radar showing the airliner full of families. I know, sir. But it's all we've got. Permission granted. God be with you, Captain. Maya positioned her F-15 above and slightly ahead of the private jet, then used her aircraft's wake turbulence like an invisible hand, pushing and guiding the smaller aircraft away from the intercept course. It was like flying on a knife edge, close enough to affect the jet's flight path but far enough to avoid collision. Sweat ran down her back inside her flight suit. Every muscle in her body was tensed, every sense heightened. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then, at 6:17 a.m., the private jet's engines coughed. Fuel starvation. The aircraft began a slow descent, and suddenly the cockpit came alive. The pilot jerked upright, grabbing the controls, his head swiveling in confusion. Maya saw the moment he spotted her F-15, saw his eyes go wide with shock and recognition. She watched him reach for his oxygen mask, saw him key his radio. Mayday, Mayday, this is November 72 Papa, I've experienced decompression, requesting emergency vectors. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. November 72 Papa, Viper 2-1 has you in sight, follow me to nearest suitable airport. She guided the shaken pilot down through the morning sky as the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the clouds in gold and crimson. The commercial airliner continued safely on its way, its passengers never knowing how close they'd come to disaster. As Maya's wheels touched down back at Seymour Johnson at 7:43 a.m., she realized her hands were shaking again, but this time with relief. She'd done it. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with skill, courage, and a crazy takeoff that had put her in position to save lives. That was what being a fighter pilot really meant.